The Adebayo family table was full. "You can sit over there, since you came as his guest." Folashade Adebayo pointed to a small table near the kitchen entrance of the Emir's table, a high-end restaurant in Ikoyi. Adana remained standing beside the chair she believed she would occupy next to her husband. The hall was decorated for her mother-in-law's 67th birthday. Nearly 30 relatives chatted around two long tables while waiters circulated with trays of small chops and flutes of champagne. The chair beside Segun had been taken by Bimpe, his sister. Folashade sat at the center of the head table, wearing a lavish red iro and buba with a matching hele, and a gold brooch that had belonged to her own mother. On the white tablecloth before her was a black debit card. She touched it from time to time, as if the piece of plastic were another jewel to be displayed to her guests. "I am Segun's wife," Adana said, keeping her voice low. Folashade smiled. "Today we are celebrating the Adebayo family, and the people who helped my son succeed. You can relax. Nobody will let you go hungry." Some relatives pretended not to hear. Others looked directly at Adana, waiting for a reaction. Segun remained seated. He adjusted his cutlery, took a sip of water, and avoided his wife's gaze. Adana waited for him to stand up, or at least remove the handbag placed on the chair that should have been hers. Segun only said, "It's just for a few hours, Adana. Don't spoil my mother's birthday." The sentence hit her more deeply than the gesture towards the small table. Folashade could be cruel, but Segun knew the truth of the last few months. He knew how much Adana had worked, how much money she had transferred, and how many times she had reorganized her own life so he could rebuild his company. Yet, he allowed his mother to treat her like someone who had only shown up to enjoy another's success. Blessing, one of the waitresses, approached to lead her to the indicated place. Adana saw the embarrassment on the young woman's face. The small table wasn't bad. It was near the kitchen, where there was more activity, and the staff's voices mixed with the sounds of the main hall. The problem wasn't the distance or the simplicity. It was Folashade's intention to separate her from her husband in front of everyone. Adana sat without arguing. Her mother-in-law raised a glass. "Today, nobody looks at the price. Segun has told them to bring the best." The relatives applauded. An uncle asked if the consulting firm had closed another big contract. Segun smiled and replied that the year had started better than he expected. Folashade placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "He always said he would take care of me. My son does not depend on anyone." Adana watched her husband accept the praise. He didn't explain that the company had lost its biggest client over a year ago. He didn't say that the current contracts barely covered the rent for his office in Victoria Island. He also didn't mention that every month Adana transferred $2,500,000 to the account used for their household expenses, allowing him to reorganize the business without selling his Lexus SUV or closing the office. At first, that help had been an intimate agreement. Adana didn't want to expose Segun or make him feel small. She earned more, had a stable career, and believed that marriage was precisely for supporting each other through different seasons. Now, that same help was being presented as proof of his success. Folashade called the maitre and ordered grilled king prawns, asun, peppered snails, and a special selection of imported cuts that were not part of the standard buffet. She also ordered expensive wines, moet for the toast, and individual desserts for everyone. "Bring it without fear," she said, tapping the black card. "My son is paying." Adana recognized the plastic as soon as Folashade held it up. It was the supplementary card issued months earlier in her mother-in-law's name after eye surgery. Adana had authorized its use only for medications, appointments, and medical emergencies. The limit was drawn directly from her main account. She looked at Segun. "Why does your mother have that card?" He leaned forward in his chair but didn't get up. "We'll talk about it later." "She's saying the card is yours." "It's just a payment method, linked to my account." Segun glanced towards his mother, worried she might overhear. "Don't do this now." Folashade noticed the exchange and spoke loudly to the relatives. Adana always gets nervous when Segun spends money on his own family. She needs to understand that marriage is not a prison. A few people laughed uncomfortably. A cousin of Folashade's commented that no woman should control her husband's bank card. Segun did not correct the statement. Adana felt that each second of his silence added another layer to the lie. Her phone vibrated in her handbag. A notification showed the value of the deposit made to the restaurant 3 days earlier. Below it, new pre-authorizations appeared. Drinks package, live band, photography service, special menu. The provisional total already exceeded 4,500,000. Adana read it carefully. She had not approved this party. Segun had said he was taking his mother for a small lunch and would use his own funds to pay. He never mentioned 28 guests, champagne, or imported steaks. Blessing brought a plate and asked if Adana would like the same cuts as the main table. Before she could answer, Folashade called out to the waitress. That table doesn't need wine or the special meats. She doesn't drink, and she's always saying she doesn't like extravagance. Adana looked at her mother-in-law. I can choose what I consume, Folashade replied with a smile. Of course, as long as you don't turn everything into a competition. Blessing served Adana normally, ignoring the order. The young woman spoke in a low voice. Your name is on the booking reservation. Adana looked up. As I saw on the deposit slip, the financial guarantor is Adana Okoro. The information wasn't unexpected, but hearing it from an employee made the situation even more absurd. The woman sitting near the kitchen door was officially the person guaranteeing payment for the entire party. Still, Folashade presented her as a secondary guest. Adana said thank you and opened her banking app. The supplementary card was active, with recent purchases from a boutique, a beauty salon, and a florist. None of them were related to a medical emergency. Folashade had been using the card for weeks. She called Mrs. Chidinma Okoro, her relationship manager at the bank, and discreetly stepped into a small corridor near the restrooms. She asked for a full confirmation of the supplementary card, its available limit, and the latest transactions. Is there a problem, ma? Chidinma asked. The card is being used at a party with almost 30 people. Did you authorize it? No. Chidinma confirmed that Folashade Adebayo was a supplementary user, but the account holder and ultimate responsible party was Adana Okoro. The bank had received a pre-authorization from the restaurant exceeding 4 million. If the consumption continued, the amount could increase before the final bill. Do you wish to block it immediately? Adana hesitated. On the other side of the wall, she heard the clatter of cutlery, laughter, and the band beginning to set up. She didn't want to cause a loss for the staff or leave the restaurant unpaid for what had already been served. Nor did she want Folashade to later claim that her daughter-in-law had ruined her birthday out of jealousy. I want to suspend new authorizations and prevent the final payment without my confirmation, she replied. The deposit already made should remain. Can you block the supplementary card but preserve the main one? Yes, ma'am. Yes, I can do that. Chidinma requested authentication and confirmed the operation. Before hanging up, she asked, Adana, ma, did you authorize your mother-in-law to use the supplementary card for an event for 28 people? Adana looked through the opening in the corridor. Folashade was on her feet, holding the black card up for the relatives to see as she thanked her son for the party. No, Adana replied. That card was only for medical emergencies. Chidinma said she would send the complete history. Adana also requested the records for the last 14 months from the account used for family expenses. Something in the way Folashade spoke of her son's success seemed bigger than just a lie about this party. When she returned to the hall, she found Segun near the main table. He had noticed the call. Did you speak to the bank? I did. What did you do? I protected my account. Segun ran a hand through his hair. My mother has already invited everyone. She invited them using a card that was meant for appointments and medication. How will I pay? My company has payments due. When? Next week. Adana held his gaze. For months, Segun had used future promises to justify present expenses. There was always a client about to pay, a commission coming in, or a contract to be signed. Adana had never pressured him because she wanted to give her husband time. This time, however, there were nearly 30 people eating under the assumption that he was a financially successful man. Did you tell your mother the card was yours? She asked. Segun took a deep breath. I told her I would handle the party. That's not what I asked. She doesn't understand banking details. She understands enough to call me a guest. He asked Adana to go back to her seat and wait until the end. They would sort out the bill between them later. Adana realized Segun still believed the problem could be reduced to a private debt. He didn't understand that the lie had already spread across the table, through the family WhatsApp group, and in the way everyone looked at her. Folashade called her son for a toast. A musician handed her a microphone. She began by thanking her relatives and spoke of the hardships she had faced after being widowed. Then she declared that the greatest blessing of her life was having a son like Segun. He never let me lack anything, she stated. Even after marrying a woman who only thinks about her career and comfort, he continued to take care of his mother and his family. Several relatives glanced at Adana. Folashade continued. Everything we are enjoying today came from his effort. Segun single-handedly built a respected company. Anyone living beside a man like this should be grateful instead of trying to control him. Her husband stood beside his mother, holding a glass of champagne. His expression showed discomfort, but he didn't take the microphone to correct anything. Adanna felt her eyes sting. She wasn't ashamed of having supported the household for a period. She wasn't ashamed of earning more. She wasn't even ashamed of helping Folashade when she believed it was part of caring for the family. The shame belonged to the man who accepted applause for money he hadn't earned. Blessing approached and discreetly placed a copy of the event order on Adanna's table. At the top of the document it said, "Booking and Financial Guarantor, Adanna Okoro." Below were the services added by Folashade and confirmed by Segun. Adanna photographed the document and put the copy in her bag. Bimpe appeared near the small table. "You're not going to toast?" "To what?" "To Mama. She just said I live off your brother's money." Bimpe looked away. "You know how she is." Segun also knows. "Don't spoil the lunch." Adanna realized that phrase circulated through the family like a rule. Whenever Folashade crossed a line, someone would ask the injured party to avoid spoiling the occasion. Peace meant keeping the matriarch comfortable, even when it required silence from everyone else. "Do you believe your brother pays for everything alone?" Adanna asked. Bimpe hesitated. "He always says the contracts are going well. Have you ever seen any of these contracts?" "It's not my business." "But my chair is." Bimpe didn't answer. Before returning to her seat, she glanced at the black card in front of Folashade. For a moment, she seemed to remember something but preferred to keep the thought to herself. The music started again. The waiters continued serving wine, champagne, and special meats. Folashade laughed, received gifts, and repeated that Segun would pay for everything. Adanna remained near the kitchen, not as someone defeated, but as the only person in that hall who already knew part of the truth. Her phone vibrated again. Chidinma had sent the confirmation of the block and the initial report on the card. The document showed that all bills were debited from Adanna's main account. The last line indicated, "Final payment subject to exclusive authorization by the primary account holder." Adanna looked up. At the center of the hall, Folashade placed the black card on the table and said to an uncle, "This is from Segun's company. My son can invite the entire family without looking at the price." Adanna closed the app. From now on, she wouldn't have to argue to prove anything. She just had to wait for the moment someone tried to use the wrong name to pay the right bill. 7 minutes after Adanna transferred 2,500,000, Segun had written in the family WhatsApp group, "Just closed a big contract. Nobody needs to worry this month." The message appeared in the report sent by Chidinma, accompanied by the exact time of the transfer. Adanna read the two records as the music drowned out the conversations. Across the hall, Segun was still receiving congratulations from uncles and cousins. No one imagined that the supposed contract was just the money sent by his wife to pay the household bills. The same sequence had repeated for 14 months. On the second working day of the month, Adanna would transfer the agreed amount. A few minutes later, Segun would announce a commission, a new client, or a successful negotiation. Then, he would send part of the money to Folashade, pay for something for Bimpe, or buy a gift for a relative. Each gesture reinforced the image of the prosperous man who provided for everyone. Adanna had never known about the charade. When the consulting firm lost its main client, Segun came home with slumped shoulders and a folder full of cancelled contracts. For weeks, he woke up in the middle of the night, reviewing proposals and calling old contacts. Adanna admired his persistence. She didn't ask why he still kept the office in Victoria Island, the expensive SUV, or the client lunches at sophisticated restaurants. She believed that preserving some of that structure might help him rebuild the business. It was she who suggested the monthly support. Sitting at their kitchen table, Adanna explained that her income covered their essential expenses and allowed for a temporary reserve for the company. She didn't present it as a favor. She said their marriage didn't need to be a permanent competition. In some years, she would contribute more. In others, perhaps Segun would carry the larger share. He held her hand and promised it would be for only a few months. "As soon as 2 contracts come in, I'll pay it all back." Adanna replied that he didn't need to return every naira. She just wanted transparency. The money should pay for the mortgage, health insurance, groceries, car payment, and basic expenses while he reorganized his client portfolio. Segun agreed. In the first month, he showed her spreadsheets and shared information about his projects. By the second, he began to say he preferred not to discuss business at home. He claimed that talking about difficulties increased his anxiety. Adanna respected that. She didn't want her husband to feel he had to report to her like an employee. The trust she offered became the space where the lie grew. Segun started by telling his mother he had received a small commission. Folashade celebrated and told Bimpe. The next month, when Adana made another transfer, he claimed to have closed a short-term consultancy. Soon after, he announced an annual contract. With each lie, it became harder to admit the truth. Folashade began to praise her son at Sunday lunches. Segun was born for business. Even when the market is bad, he always finds a way. Adana listened without suspicion. She imagined her husband was genuinely earning some side income. He never said in front of her that all the money came from his company. He would just smile, change the subject, or allow his mother to construct the most convenient version. When Folashade received a transfer, she would call to thank her son. Segun wouldn't explain that part of the money came from Adana's salary. He would just say his mother didn't need to worry. Afterwards, he would tell his wife he had used the family budget to help with her medication, service charge, or groceries. Adana accepted it because she believed everything remained within their agreement as a couple. The supplementary card came after Folashade's eye surgery. She needed to buy expensive eye drops and attend frequent follow-ups. Segun argued it would be easier to issue a card in her name than to make transfers for every appointment. Adana agreed, but set a clear condition: medical use or emergencies only. For the first few months, the expenses matched their agreement. Then, purchases from pharmacies started to include cosmetics, imported products, and perfumes. Segun would say his mother got the items mixed up or had taken advantage of a sale. Adana didn't want to argue over small amounts. She paid the bill and moved on. The silence taught Folashade to believe there were no limits. At the restaurant, a waiter brought another bottle of wine to the main table. Folashade raised her glass and gestured grandly to Adana. "Won't you toast to your husband's success?" Adana replied from where she sat. "I'm waiting to understand whose success it is." A few relatives heard but didn't comprehend. Segun stood up immediately and walked to her table. "What are you doing?" "Reading my bank statements." "Now is not the time." "It is the time. They are using my card." "You blocked it." "The supplementary card won't make new purchases." Segun looked at his mother. Folashade was laughing as a photographer captured the toast. He knew that when the bill arrived, the show would be over. "Adana, unblock it. I'll sort it out with you at home." "Like you've sorted it out for the last 14 months? I don't understand." She showed him her phone. The screen displayed the scheduled transfer and, right below it, the message sent to the family group. Segun read just enough to realize Chidinma had sent the complete history. "You invaded my conversations. The family group is also mine. You never participate because your mother always makes it clear I don't belong." Segun pulled up an empty chair and sat opposite her. He asked her not to make accusations without understanding the context. He said that at first, he really had expected to recover the company quickly. Each month he failed. The shame grew. When Folashade asked about business, he couldn't admit he depended on his wife's income. "So you invented contracts?" "I just didn't want to worry her." "You sent her my money and said it was your commission." "It was money from our house, but the credit was all yours." Segun insisted he had never directly said Adana was supported by him. She asked how many times he had corrected Folashade when his mother made that claim. Her husband looked away. "Not once." For months, he had listened to his wife being called a woman who only thought of comfort, who spent his money, and who didn't help the Adebayo family. Instead of defending Adana, he had remained silent, because the lie put him in the position he had always wanted to occupy. "I didn't care about earning more," Adana said. "Did you?" Segun replied that it was difficult to be introduced as the husband of a finance director while his own company was failing. At family gatherings, everyone asked about his clients, his contracts, and the growth of his business. Folashade told stories about how he would be the first great tycoon in the family. "I didn't want to be a disappointment. So you decided I would be?" "That's not it. You let your mother call me a woman who lives off your success. She's just excited about the party. She believes it because you taught her to." Segun fell silent. Adana opened another page of the report. On one date, she had transferred 2,500,000 at 8:10. At 8:17 a.m., Segun had written in the group, "The commission just landed. Mama can book her checkups." At 9 a.m., he had transferred 400,000 to Folashade. In another month, Adana sent the same amount. Segun announced, "Client renewed the contract. I'm going to pay for Pedro's school fees." That afternoon, he had transferred 150,000 to Bimpe for his nephew's school. Bimpe approached silently. The mention of her son's name made her stop behind her brother. "What school fees?" Adana asked. Bimpe looked from one to the other. Segun helped when the school increased the fees. "With money from which contract?" Her sister-in-law opened her mouth but didn't answer. She recalled the day she had seen a notification on her brother's phone with the name Adana Okoro. Segun had said she was an important client. Bimpe had believed it because she needed to believe it. Asking more might have forced her to return the money. "Did you know?" Adana asked. "I saw your name once." "And what did he say?" "That it was a client transfer." Segun stood up. "Bimpe, go back to the table. She has a right to know." "No, not at Mama's birthday." Adana let out a short breath. The family always repeated the same logic. The truth could wait, as long as the celebration and appearances remained intact. Bimpe sat in a nearby chair. She admitted that Segun had paid part of her son's school fees for 6 months. He had also helped with a renovation in her flat, and with Folashad's dental plan. Everyone believed the consultancy was thriving. Their mother boasted that her son was earning commissions so high he was already thinking of buying a bigger house. "He never said the money came from you," Bimpe said. "He also never said it didn't." Segun accused his sister of making things worse. Bimpe retorted that he should have thought of that before using the name of a non-existent client. For the first time, someone from the family stopped protecting his image. At the main table, Folashade called for Bimpe. Her daughter replied that she was talking with Adana. The mother frowned, picked up the black card, and walked towards them. "What is the problem now?" Adana pointed to the plastic. "Ma, did you know this card is linked to my account?" Segun said it was from the company. "My name appears on the app." "I don't waste time reading details. You used it at a boutique, a salon, and a florist." Folashade reacted as if those purchases were insignificant. She said Segun had authorized them and that Adana shouldn't scrutinize every kobo used by her own husband's mother. She added that her son always paid the bill. "With which money?" Adana asked. "With the money from his work." Segun tried to interrupt, but Folashade continued. She recounted how every month her son received large commissions, paid her expenses, and still maintained the house. Adana should show gratitude for living with such a responsible man. Bimpe looked at her brother. "Tell her." Folashade turned. "Tell me what?" Segun insisted this was not the right place. Adana replied that the restaurant had become the right place the moment Folashade displayed the card and called her a guest. The mother-in-law clutched the plastic. "You want to ruin my birthday out of jealousy. I want to know why you're using an emergency card to pay for a party. Your husband gave it to me, and he had no authorization." Folashade sought support from her son. "Segun, tell her whose money it is." He remained silent. The hesitation was brief, but it was enough to create the first crack in his mother's confidence. Folashade knew her son. When he was certain, he answered quickly. When he needed to invent something, he asked for time. "Why aren't you answering?" she insisted. Segun said their resources as a couple were shared. Folashade asked if the company was paying for the party. He replied that he would settle the bill later. His mother realized he was avoiding the story he had told the relatives. Adana hadn't revealed everything yet. She still needed to check the full 14 months of statements and separate what was used for common expenses from what had served to uphold Segun's image. She also wanted to know if he had taken money for himself beyond what they had agreed. Chidinma sent the final file. Adana opened the first page. The sequence was clear. Scheduled transfer from Adana Okoro, 2,500,000. Immediately below, transfer to Folashade Adebayo. The same lines appeared month after month. On the last page was the history of authorization messages for the card. The restaurant's request had been confirmed from Segun's phone, accompanied by a note sent to his mother. "You can invite everyone. If it goes over the limit, Adana will cover it. She won't make a scene in front of the family." Adana looked up. Segun could no longer claim he believed he had authorization. He knew she wouldn't agree. He also knew that in front of the relatives, he was counting on the same silence Folashade used to push her towards the kitchen. Transaction not authorized. The message appeared on the POS machine's screen a few minutes after the band finished their last song. Folashade was still holding her champagne glass when Felipe Moura, the manager of the Emir's table, removed the black card from the terminal. Around the main table, the relatives stopped talking. Some still had napkins on their laps. Others watched the tray where the bill of over 4,800,000 rested. Folashade let out an impatient laugh. "Try it again. That card has a high limit." Felipe repeated the operation. The same response appeared. "Maybe it's the machine," Segun suggested, getting up quickly. The manager brought another terminal. Folashade handed him the card with more force, as if the plastic had failed for lack of authority. The third attempt was also declined. The silence around the table became uncomfortable. Even the relatives who had been drinking heavily began to pay attention. "Call the bank," Folashade ordered. The call must be made by the account holder, Felipe explained. My son is here. Felipe consulted the data on his system. Mr. Segun Adebayo is not listed as the primary holder. Folashade turned to her son. What do you mean? Segun reached out his hand. Let me handle this. He took out his own card and asked Felipe to charge the amount in installments. The first attempt was denied for insufficient funds. The manager reduced the amount. Still, the transaction was not approved. Segun opened his banking app, scrolled quickly, and tried a second card. The available limit didn't cover even a third of the bill. An uncle sitting in the corner asked jokingly, "Where are all those commissions, Segun?" No one laughed. Folashade approached her son. You said this party was paid for. The deposit was made. And the rest? I thought the card would go through. She grabbed his arm. That card isn't from your company, is it? Segun looked at Adanna, still seated near the kitchen door. His wife did not get up immediately. For the first time since the party began, the entire family was looking towards the spot where Folashade had tried to hide her. Felipe analyzed the booking information again. The document showed the initial deposit, the added services, and the account linked to the black card. He asked for a moment and called Blessing, who brought the folder with the signed voucher. We need authorization from the primary account holder, the manager said. Folashade pointed at Segun. He already authorized it. Mr. Segun confirmed the services, but he is not the financial guarantor. Then who is? Felipe looked up and called out clearly. Mrs. Adanna Okoro. The name cut across the hall. Heads turned in unison. Adanna stood up slowly. She picked up her bag, her phone, and the copy of the order Blessing had given her. She walked between the tables as relatives made way. There was no triumph in her expression, only the tired serenity of someone who no longer needed to fight for her version of the truth. Folashade turned to Pale. She is just his wife. Felipe replied respectfully. Mrs. Folashade is listed as a supplementary user. The primary holder of the account, the limit, and the guarantee is Mrs. Adanna Okoro. Bimpe brought a hand to her mouth. She remembered the notification she had seen months ago on her brother's phone. The name Segun had presented as a client was now being called by the manager as the owner of the card that had financed the entire party. Adanna reached the mobile payment station. I want to review the bill before any payment is made. Folashade reacted immediately. You blocked it on purpose. I blocked a card being used outside of its authorized purpose. It was my birthday. It was not a medical emergency. Segun gave me the card. He had no right to give it. Segun tried to pull his wife away from the table. Let's talk in private. Adanna didn't move. You told everyone you would pay for this party with money from your company. You can explain it here. It's not necessary to expose our financial life. My financial life was already used to call me a guest. Felipe asked everyone to remain calm. He informed them that the restaurant did not wish to get involved in a family dispute, but needed to be paid for services rendered. The deposit covered part of the buffet and basic drinks. The remaining items had to be paid for or included in a formal agreement. Adanna asked for the complete list. Blessing placed the documents in front of her. The total included 28 premium buffets, imported steaks, wines, champagne, cocktails, special desserts, a live band, a photographer, decorations, and party favors distributed to the guests. There were also 3 unopened bottles of wine that Folashade had requested to take home. These bottles can be removed from the bill, Adanna said. Folashade slammed her hand on the table. I have already chosen them, so you can pay with your card. You are humiliating me in front of the family. Adanna looked around, seeing the same people who had toasted Segun's success and accepted her place near the kitchen without a question. Ma, you started this party by saying I lived off your son's money. Because it's true. Segun closed his eyes. Adanna opened her app and showed the name linked to the card. This limit comes from my salary account. Folashade retorted that a married woman's money also belonged to her husband. Adanna didn't argue about property regimes. She simply explained that the supplementary card had a defined purpose. Its misuse was being contested, and no one could contract services in another's name without consent. Bimpe came closer. Mama, did you know her name was on the card? I never paid attention. I saw it once, Bimpe confessed. On Segun's phone. The mother-in-law turned slowly. And what did he say? That Adanna Okoro was a client. Everyone looked at Segun. He tried to smile. There's been a misunderstanding. Adanna opened the report sent by Chidinma covering 14 months. Her husband again asked her to put the phone down. He said their bank statements should not be shown to the family. Adanna replied that she wouldn't reveal unnecessary private expenses. She would only show the records related to the story he had told about his income. Felipe suggested moving everyone to a private room. Folashade refused. She believed that leaving the main table would look like a confession. Besides, some relatives were already discreetly recording the discussion. She still hoped Segun could produce an explanation that would regain control. "My son works," she asserted. "Nobody said he doesn't work," Adana replied. "So he has an income." "He does, but not the income he presented to you." Segun wiped his face. "Adana, please." She looked at him. "I was never ashamed of earning more." "Why were you?" The question received no answer. Felipe confirmed that the final payment would remain suspended until the primary holder decided what to authorize. Adana informed him she would pay only for her own meal and would let the deposit stand. The rest would be divided among those responsible for the orders. Folashade looked offended. "You want to charge the guests? I want the person who did the inviting to take responsibility for what they ordered. They came because Segun invited them. Then Segun can pay." Her husband lowered his voice. "I don't have that amount today." A murmur went through the table. Folashade looked at him as if he had said something impossible. "You said you had closed 2 contracts. The payments were delayed." Adana opened a message in the family group. "Which one of them?" Segun recognized the date. It was one of the days she had transferred 2,500,000. "I don't remember." Adana showed the time of the bank transfer and, right below it, the message sent 7 minutes later. "Just closed a big contract. Nobody needs to worry this month." Bimpe read it aloud. Then she asked, "Was that contract Adana's money?" Segun replied that the transfer went into the family account and therefore couldn't be treated as exclusively her money. Adana agreed that the money was meant for the house. What he had no right to do was present it as his own earnings and use the lie to gain prestige. "I transferred it because your company was in trouble," she said. "Not for you to pretend you were providing for everyone." Folashade looked from one to the other. "What trouble?" Segun remained silent. Adana didn't reveal everything yet. She just said that the consultancy had lost its main client over a year ago and that she had started covering most of the expenses. Her husband was still working, but his income didn't match what he told the family. A cousin asked if the trips, gifts, and dinners had also been paid for by Adana. Segun replied that they were couples' expenses. "But you used to say they were your commissions," remembered the uncle who had asked about the card's limit. Folashade raised her voice. "He doesn't have to answer to any of you." Adana agreed. "He didn't, until he used my money to create a lie about me." Her mother-in-law accused her of using a card problem to destroy her husband's image. She said a loyal wife would protect her man in front of the family, even when he faced difficulties. Adana felt the old guilt trying to reach her. For 14 months, she had used that exact reasoning to avoid asking questions. "This time," she replied, "I protected him through his difficulty. He offered me up as the guilty party." Segun asked his mother to sit down. Folashade refused. She wanted to know since when her son had been depending on his wife. He tried to say he wasn't dependent, just using shared resources temporarily. Adana opened the statement from the last few months. The transfer was scheduled, 2,500,000 at the beginning of every month. Bimpe asked to see. The lines repeated with clarity. Scheduled transfer from Adana Okoro, 2,500,000. Then, transfer to Folashade Adebayo. Folashade read her own name and stepped back. "You told me it was commission." Segun replied that the money mixed with the company's resources. Adana corrected him. The transfers went into the household account, not the business account. In several months, part of the money went to Folashade, just hours later. "You gave me her money?" his mother asked. "It was our money, but you said you had earned it. I didn't want to worry you." Folashade was speechless for a few seconds. Worry didn't explain the toasts, the photographs, and the stories she had repeated to the relatives. Segun hadn't just hidden a difficulty, he had fed a fantasy in which he was the provider, and Adana was the ungrateful woman enjoying his success. Bimpe faced her brother. "Did Pedro's school fees also come from these transfers?" Segun admitted they did. His sister looked at Adana. "I thought it was his money." "I also thought you knew," Adana replied. The sentence didn't just accuse Bimpe, it revealed how much Segun had isolated the narratives. To his wife, he said he was helping his family with common funds. To his mother and sister, he said he was using his own earnings. Thus, he received gratitude from everyone, while Adana remained invisible. Blessing brought water for her. The waitress had witnessed part of the argument but showed no curiosity. She just placed the glass near Adana and asked if she needed a few minutes. Folashade noticed the gesture. Even the staff is on her side. Felipe responded firmly. Our team is not taking sides, ma'am. We are dealing with the registered account holder. The phrase, account holder, seemed to wound Folashade more than any accusation. She had spent the entire party holding the card as a symbol of her son's success. Now the manager himself was confirming she was just a supplementary user, and Segun didn't even hold the primary position. Adana asked for the bill to be split. Felipe divided the initial deposit, Adana's meal, the services ordered by Folashade, the items confirmed by Segun, and the individual consumptions that could be paid by each family. Some relatives immediately offered to pay for what they had consumed. Others complained, saying they had been invited. An older couple left cash on the table and apologized to Adana for believing Folashade's words. The birthday woman was indignant. Nobody is paying anything. Segun promised. Her husband replied, I can't pay for everything today. It was the first entirely true sentence he had uttered in front of the family. The hall fell silent. Bimpe then asked the question everyone was avoiding. If Adana is the account holder and the money came from her, where did the income you claimed to receive at the start of every month come from? Segun looked at the statement on his wife's phone, then at his mother. He opened his mouth, but no new story came out. Bimpe's question hung over the table. If Adana is the account holder and the money came from her, where did the income you claimed to receive at the start of every month come from? Segun looked at the open statement on his wife's phone, then at Folashade, who was still clutching the declined card. For 14 months, he had answered similar questions with ready-made stories. He spoke of commissions, contracts, old clients, and confidential negotiations. At that moment, however, each lie was linked to a date, a time, and a transfer made by Adana. My company is still running, he replied. Nobody asked that, Bimpe said. I asked where the money came from. Segun asked his sister not to turn a marital problem into a public inquiry. An uncle retorted that his financial life became public the moment he invited nearly 30 people and promised to pay for everything. Another relative remembered that Segun had spent years offering business advice and criticizing men who depended on their wives' incomes. Folashade slammed the card on the table. My son does not depend on anyone. Adana opened the file sent by Chidinma. Then let's look at the records. Segun reached out to stop her from showing the screen. You have no right to expose our account. I have the right to correct a lie built with my salary. She didn't show personal purchases, medical expenses, or intimate details. She opened only the transfers related to the story Segun had told the family. The first record was from 14 months ago. 2,500,000 had left Adana's salary account and entered their joint household account. 7 minutes later, Segun had written in the group, just closed a big contract. Nobody needs to worry this month. That morning, he had transferred 400,000 to Folashade. The following month, the sequence repeated. Adana sent 2,500,000. Segun announced a commission. 2 hours later, he paid part of his nephew's school fees and sent money to his mother. In the third month, he wrote, client renewed for another 6 months. The supposed client payment had the exact same value and origin as the previous transfers. Felipe remained near the counter, accompanied by Blessing. The manager did not participate in the discussion but needed to know who would settle the bill. Some relatives began checking old messages on their phones. The dates coincided with gifts, lunches, and announcements made by Segun. You invented all these contracts? Bimpe asked. Not all of them. Which ones were real? He mentioned 2 small clients and a one-off consultancy. Adana confirmed that the company still had some revenue. She had never said Segun didn't work. The problem was different. The real income didn't cover the lifestyle he presented, much less the expenses he offered to his family. How much did your company earn per month? Folashade asked. Segun avoided answering. Adana didn't want to humiliate him for earning less. For 14 months, she had protected this information precisely because she understood how the loss of the big client had affected him. But Segun had turned her discretion into a tool for self-promotion. The average varied, Adana explained. Some months he made 800,000, in others less. The money that maintained our house came mainly from my salary. Folashade turned pale. And the car? Paid from the household account. The office. Also, my health insurance, in large part too. The mother turned to her son. You said it was you. Segun replied that as Adana's husband, he saw no point in separating every kobo. The household account served them both. He used the money according to the family's needs. Adana agreed with one part. The money was shared to pay for our life, not for you to pretend you earned it alone and let your mother say I lived at your expense. Folashade claimed she had never been given explanations about the origin of the deposits. Segun sent the money and said his commissions had come in. She just believed her own son. But you saw my name on the app, Adana reminded her. Once, and I preferred to believe I was a client. That's what Segun explained. Because that explanation allowed you to keep using the money without acknowledging me. The mother-in-law took offense. She said she had never asked Adana to support her. Her son offered help spontaneously. Adana opened another page of the report. There were monthly transfers to Folashade, purchases on the supplementary card, and payments for service charges, dental plans, and personal services. Perhaps you didn't ask for everything, Ma, Adana said. But you accepted everything while calling me the woman who controlled your son's money. Segun tried to interrupt. My mother didn't know. Did you? He remained silent. Felipe informed them that some families had already paid for their own consumption. The outstanding bill had decreased, but it still included the central services requested by Folashade and confirmed by Segun. The manager offered a payment plan, provided there was a down payment and documentation from the responsible parties. Folashade refused. This party was a gift from my son, Adana replied. Then he should take responsibility for the gift. Segun asked Felipe to charge part of it the next day. The manager explained that the restaurant could not close out the bill without payment or a formal contract. Her husband then asked Adana to authorize the main card just to avoid more embarrassment. You want me to pay to protect the story you invented? She asked. I'll pay you back. With which contract? The question provoked a few murmurs. Segun lost his temper and accused his wife of taking advantage of his company's difficulties to place herself above him. He said Adana had always liked to control spreadsheets, limits, and decisions. Maybe she didn't say it directly, but she made her husband feel like he had to ask for permission to help his own mother. Adana absorbed the accusation without raising her voice. I never asked you to be ashamed of earning less. You didn't have to ask. I offered help, and now you're demanding it in front of everyone. I'm demanding it because you used that help to say I was a burden. Segun replied that he had never used those words. Adana pointed to Folashade. She used them. Did you listen? My mother was emotional. She put me near the kitchen and said I lived off your success. I didn't want to cause an argument. You protected your image by letting her destroy mine. The whole fell silent. Segun looked at his mother. Folashade no longer seemed just angry. There was shame on her face. For years, she had presented her son as an example of prosperity. She compared him to his cousins, talked about the restaurants where he took her, and showed off gifts as proof of his devotion. Discovering that a large part of it came from the woman she had humiliated, wounded her pride more than the declined card. You should have told me, the mother said to her son. I was trying to protect you. From what? From thinking I had failed. Folashade pressed her lips together. So you preferred for me to believe your wife was an ungrateful woman. Segun did not answer. The question revealed that the lie didn't have just one victim. He had manipulated his mother to preserve her admiration, his sister to receive her gratitude, and his wife to maintain his funding. Each person received a different version. Bimpe opened old chats on her phone. When you paid for Pedro's school fees and wrote it was a commission, Segun said he had intended to return the money to the account later. Adana asked how many times that had actually happened. He couldn't answer. Chidinma joined a video call after Adana authorized the data confirmation. The manager remained objective. She informed them that Adana Okoro was the primary holder of the main account and responsible for the card's limit. Folashade Adebayo was listed as a supplementary user with the purpose initially registered as health and emergency expenses. Chidinma also confirmed that the bills had been paid in full from Adana's salary account. So, Segun Adebayo was never the primary holder of this card? Felipe asked. No, Chidinma replied. He had viewing access and limited authorization on another card, which was later revoked. Folashade looked at the black plastic. So, my name is on it, but the money always came from her. Yes, ma'am. The answer destroyed the last bit of room for interpretation. Adana asked Chidinma to confirm the history of scheduled transfers. The manager explained that for 14 months, 2,500,000 was sent monthly from Adana's individual account to the joint household account. Segun received notifications and moved the funds, but the origin was his wife's salary. Folashade sat down. Why did you never tell me? She asked Adana. The question carried more accusation than curiosity. Because I thought Segun was being truthful about our finances. You liked seeing me thank him. I didn't even know how much he transferred to you, Ma. But you must have guessed. I guessed that my husband was an honest man. Folashade looked away. A cousin asked if Segun wasn't ashamed to accept applause for his wife's money. He replied that he was ashamed of being seen as a man incapable of providing for his own family. The company had been his biggest project. When he lost the main client, he believed he would recover everything in a few months. Each transfer from Adana bought more time. In the beginning, I just didn't correct my mother, he confessed. Then I started talking about commissions. Before I knew it, everyone believed it. Adana replied, "You knew it from the first lie. I was desperate, and I was by your side. You were successful. You wouldn't understand. I understood so much that I supported our household without telling a soul." Segun closed his eyes. Adana continued, "I wasn't ashamed of earning more. It was you who was ashamed to admit that I was holding our house together while you tried to start over." Bimpe began to cry, not out of pity for her brother, but for her own part in it. She admitted she had suspected something when she saw Adana's name on the transfer, but had chosen to believe the explanation because she needed the money for her son's school. "I should have asked," she said. Adana did not console her immediately. Everyone had preferred the version that benefited them. Bimpe nodded, promising to pay back the amount received in installments. Adana replied that they would have that conversation another time. She didn't want to turn every past help into an automatic debt. What she demanded was the truth. Folashade, however, still tried to preserve some authority. "Even if the money came from you," Segun managed it. "He also worked." "I never denied that. So you can't say he didn't contribute." "I never said that either. But you are making everyone think he is a leech." Adana looked at her husband. "He was the one who chose to use my money to seem bigger and to make me seem smaller." Segun finally admitted that he had given the card to Folashad, knowing Adana would not approve of the party. He also confessed to sending the message saying she would cover any excess because she wouldn't make a scene in front of the family. Felipe asked him to repeat that. Segun replied that he took responsibility for confirming the services. The manager noted the declaration on the contract. Folashade looked at her son in disbelief. "You knew she would say no?" "I did. And you let me invite everyone?" "I thought when the bill came she would pay." Adana asked why. "Because you always solve things." The late honesty struck the core of their relationship. Segun hadn't just counted on his wife's salary, he had counted on her character. He knew Adana respected employees, avoided scandals, and wouldn't leave third parties with a loss. He had turned those qualities into a financial guarantee. "You know me well enough to use me," she said, "but not well enough to respect me." He started to cry. He apologized and said he would pay back everything. Adana replied that the debt was not limited to the restaurant. For 14 months, he had allowed his family to believe she depended on him. Every time Folashade diminished her, Segun protected his own character. Felipe presented the final breakdown. The deposit made from Adana's account covered part of the basic buffet. She authorized it to be kept, paid for her own meal and a tip for blessing, plus a proportional share of the common services she had actually used. The relatives began to pay for their individual consumptions. Bimpe covered the bill for her own family. 2 uncles split the drinks. Other guests grumbled but ended up using their own cards or making bank transfers. What remained were the items requested by Folashad and confirmed by Segun. The mother-in-law had to use part of her own savings for a down payment. Segun signed an agreement with the restaurant for the remaining balance, committing to sell his SUV if he couldn't pay it off in time. When the paperwork was done, Adana asked for the supplementary card. Folashade hesitated. "I still have appointments. I can transfer the amount for your health plan directly for 30 days. This card will not remain active. After everything I've done for my son, you're going to leave me without help? Help is not unlimited access." Folashade placed the plastic on the table. Adana asked Felipe for a pair of scissors. The manager handed them over without comment. She cut the black card in 2 and placed the pieces on the party bill. "My limit will no longer be the imaginary salary you present to your family." Segun grabbed her arm. "Don't end our marriage here." Adana pulled away. "You ended a part of it every time you accepted applause for what I did in silence." He asked for a chance to talk at home. Adana looked at her wedding ring. The ring had been bought in a time when they shared a small flat and no income disparity mattered. Back then, Segun said marriage meant walking side by side. For the last 14 months, he had chosen to place her behind him. Adana removed the ring and left it next to the cut card. "When I get back, I want your things to be packed." Folashade stood up. "You're going to abandon my son because he had financial problems?" Adana looked directly at her. "No, I am leaving because he used my money to lie and your silence to humiliate me." Then she picked up her bag. As she crossed the hall, she passed by the small table near the kitchen door again. Blessing was clearing the last plates. The waitress offered to return the copy of the order, but Adana asked her to keep it with the restaurant's documents until the final payment was settled. Behind her, she left Segun, the cut card, and a whole table of relatives who finally understood who had sustained the story they had all applauded. Adana walked out of the restaurant without looking back. This time, not because someone had decided where she should sit, but because she had chosen not to remain in a family that only recognized her place when they needed her limit. Segun left the apartment before Adana returned from the restaurant. On the living room table, he placed the keys, the estate access card, and a sheet of paper with the passwords for the household accounts he still managed. He took his clothes, documents, and company laptop, but he didn't touch the furniture or the objects they had acquired together over 13 years of marriage. For the first time, he understood that he didn't have the right to decide alone what still belonged to the couple. Adana arrived close to midnight. The apartment was quiet, but her husband's absence brought no immediate relief. On the console was an old photograph of the two of them in a simple buka, long before the consultancy, the imported SUV, and the need to impress Folashade. Back then, they shared one dessert because they couldn't afford two. Segun didn't seem ashamed when Adana got a promotion. He used to say that one person's success made the whole house grow. She wondered at what point their partnership had turned into a competition. She didn't read the letter he left that night. She opened her banking app, cancelled the scheduled transfers, and asked Chidinma for a complete separation of their accounts. The main card received a new number. All supplementary access was revoked. Adana also removed Segun from the authorizations used for mortgage, car, and insurance payments. Each operation felt cold, but none was driven by revenge. They were doors she was closing after discovering how many people had walked through them without asking. At the restaurant, the bill was settled before closing time. Some relatives paid their own way. Bimpe covered her family's expenses and transferred an additional amount to cover part of the collective services. Two uncles split the drinks. Folashade used almost all the savings she had and signed as responsible for the packages she had personally requested. Segun was left with the largest balance. 3 days later, he put his SUV up for sale. The vehicle represented the exact image he had tried to maintain. Even when the company began losing clients, he continued to arrive at family lunches with the car gleaming, allowing everyone to interpret that appearance as proof of success. Selling it didn't just resolve a debt, it forced him to abandon the primary symbol of his lie. The money paid the restaurant, part of the card bills, and a portion of the amount taken from the family account for expenses Adana knew nothing about. The rest was included in a formal agreement prepared by her lawyer. Segun signed without argument. In their first meeting at the lawyer's office, he still tried to explain that he had never considered Adana a source of money. He claimed to have felt temporarily lost, just waiting to get the company back on its feet. The lawyer placed the messages sent to Folashad and the family group in front of him. 14 months was not a moment of confusion. It was a routine. Segun then acknowledged in writing that he had presented his wife's transfers as his own revenue, given the supplementary card to his mother, and contracted services without authorization. He also declared that the money used to help Folashad and Bimpe came largely from the funds sent by Adana for household expenses. The confession was included in their separation agreement. Folashade reacted badly when she discovered the card would not be replaced. She called her son, saying she needed medication, tests, and appointments. Segun replied that he would continue to help within the means he could actually afford, but would not use Adana's account again. His mother accused her daughter-in-law of abandoning an elderly woman after years of family life. Adana listened to the voicemail without replying. For a long time, she had offered help to prevent Folashade from facing hardship. The mistake hadn't been in helping. It had been in allowing the absence of boundaries to be mistaken for an obligation. His mother would not lose her health insurance or go without medication. She would just need to reorganize her own expenses and stop using a card belonging to someone else. Bimpe was the first to approach Adana. She arrived at her office with a folder of receipts. Inside were the amounts Segun had paid for her son's school, the dental plan, and part of her flat renovation. Bimpe couldn't pay it all back at once, but proposed monthly transfers. "I should have asked where the money was coming from," she said. "You did ask once, and you accepted the answer because you needed it to be true." Adana understood. She didn't want to turn every past act of help into a retroactive debt. She only asked Bimpe to return the amount for the most recent school fees, paid after she already suspected the source. Her sister-in-law agreed. "I also need to apologize for the table." Adana remained silent. Bimpe continued. "When Mama told you to sit near the kitchen, I knew it was wrong. But I stayed in my chair, next to Segun, because that's what we always did. Mama would hurt someone, and we would ask the injured person not to spoil the occasion. That's exactly what happened. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. Adana accepted the apology, but made it clear that trust would need to be rebuilt over time. For the first time, someone from the Adebayo family recognized that remorse did not grant an immediate right to reconciliation. Folashade took longer. In the following weeks, she told relatives that the party ended badly because Adana was controlling and didn't like Segun helping his mother. The version didn't last. Many guests had seen the account holder's name on the system and heard the statements being read. Bimpe also refused to repeat the lie. When a cousin directly asked who had paid the family's expenses for the last year, Segun told the truth. He said Adana had supported most of the household while he tried to recover his consultancy. He also said he had called those transfers commissions. The public confession cost him the admiration he had tried so hard to preserve. Some relatives felt pity. Others distanced themselves. An uncle who always asked for financial advice stopped calling. Folashade was furious that her son had exposed the family, but Segun replied that the lie had already exposed Adana for 14 months. It was the first time he had defended her without expecting her to be present to reward him for it. Even so, Adana did not go back. Segun closed his office in Victoria Island and ended rental contracts he could no longer sustain. He accepted a position as an account manager at a smaller company. The salary was much lower than the income he claimed to have, but it was consistent and didn't need to be invented in the family group chat. On his first day of work, Folashade asked why he had accepted a demotion. Segun replied, "Earning less was never my shame, Mama. Lying about what I earned was..." He started therapy shortly after. During the first few sessions, he spoke about the pressure to live up to his mother's expectations. Since he was young, Folashade had said Segun would be the man to change the Adebayo family's destiny. Every achievement was announced as a family victory. Every difficulty had to be hidden to not destroy the character built around him. Over time, he understood that Folashade hadn't created the lie alone. She had offered the expectation. He had chosen to feed it. When Adana started transferring money, Segun had several opportunities to tell the truth. He could have said his wife was supporting him, that their marriage was going through a different phase, and that his company was still finding its footing. He chose to turn cooperation into individual merit. The therapist asked why he allowed his mother to call Adana a dependent woman. Segun replied, "Because if I defended her, I would have had to explain where the money was coming from." The sentence stayed with him for months. Folashade began to reorganize her own life when she realized no new card was coming. She cancelled beauty services, cut back on lunches out, and sold some of the clothes she had bought using Adana's limit. Her flat remained comfortable, but it no longer served as a backdrop for a standard of living she couldn't afford. The absence of money brought a loneliness Folashade hadn't expected. Many relatives showed up when Segun offered dinners, gifts, or help. When the perks ended, the phone calls dwindled. She realized that part of the admiration built around her son depended on the very thing she criticized in Adana: money. 4 months later, Folashade sent a short message. "I knew your name was on the card. I didn't ask, because it was easier to believe Segun." Adana read it and waited. Another message arrived. "I called you a guest because I didn't want everyone to realize the party depended on you." It wasn't a full apology yet, but it was the first sentence without an accusation. Adana replied, "That is exactly what hurt me." Folashade wrote that she was ashamed, not just of the bill, but of having used her daughter-in-law as an invisible person. When she needed the credit limit, she accepted Adana as family. When she was handing out places, recognition, and gratitude, she returned her to the position of an outsider. Adana did not resume Sunday visits. She said she needed to keep her distance. Folashade accepted, though with difficulty. The change didn't erase years of behavior, but it prevented the story from ending in a false reconciliation built only to alleviate her mother-in-law's guilt. 6 months after the party, Segun asked to meet at a coffee shop. He arrived by public transport, wearing a simple shirt and carrying a folder with receipts for the payments he had made. He didn't try to impress her. "I still love you," he said. Adana looked out the window. "I also loved the man who didn't need to seem bigger than me. I'm trying to understand when I became that person. When you discovered my silence protected your image." Segun admitted it. He said he wouldn't ask her to forget, but he wanted to know if there was any possibility of rebuilding in the future. Adana replied that his change had to exist for its own sake, even if she never came back. Otherwise, it would be just another strategy to recover something he had lost. "I'm not going to wait for you to become honest," she said. "Honesty needs to be your life, not your argument. Segun accepted it. The separation proceeded. Adana changed some habits, stopped automatically assuming all expenses, and began reviewing shared contracts with more attention, not because she had become distrustful, but because she had learned that clarity was also a form of care. At work, she participated in a discussion about marital finances. Without naming names, she told how transfers intended to support a home could be reinterpreted by someone who wanted to control the narrative. Several women admitted to living in similar situations. Some paid hidden bills to preserve their husbands' images. Others gave out supplementary cards without knowing the expenses. Adana realized she wasn't the only one who had confused discretion with protection. Almost a year later, she received a small package at her office. The sender was the emir's table. Inside was an envelope forgotten among the party documents. Blessing had found the paper while organizing a folder. It was the slip from the declined transaction. At the top, it read, "Account holder, Adana Okoro." On the back, the waitress had written, "Ma, you were the only person at that table who didn't need to diminish anyone to prove your own worth." Adana held the paper for a few minutes. The machine had declined the payment because she had blocked an improper use, but emotionally, that rejection represented something bigger. For years, Adana had allowed Segun to use her competence to preserve his pride. That Sunday, for the first time, her limit had said no before she had to scream it. She put the slip in a drawer, not as a trophy against the Adebayo family, but as a reminder that the truth sometimes just needs to be called by its correct name. Months later, Adana entered a small restaurant with 2 colleagues. There was no luxurious hall, no live band, no imported bottles. The waiter asked where they would prefer to sit. Adana looked at the available tables. She chose one near the window. No one had reserved her seat for someone else. No one had pushed her to the back. No one said she was there as a favor. Segun had discovered too late that earning less than his wife had never made him small. What had diminished him was using her money to seem bigger. Folashade had discovered that a supplementary card did not turn gratitude into ownership. Adana had discovered that helping someone did not mean giving them the right to rewrite her story. When dessert arrived, she raised her glass and toasted with her colleagues. Not to a man's success, not to a family's approval. She toasted to the peace of occupying a place she had chosen for herself.